Good morning. I wanted to do a live reaction to the State of the Union last night. It's good to be able to talk to everyone and start broadcasting again. A little update. Because I'm broadcasting on all channels, I do want everyone to understand that the Blue Collar Intellectual podcast will be returning this month. I'll be setting up the first episode likely next week. Any comments you have about the State of the Union address last night or the GOP rebuttal? I'm going to give my assessment of both. Go ahead and type them in the comments and I will respond accordingly. So, after watching the State of the Union, after watching it and then listening to it, because there's a difference between what you see and what you hear. You do pick up things when you're listening versus when you're actually watching. When I watched it, Joe Biden looked like he had some energy, more than he normally does. He gave a typical speech. Now you got to remember, Joe Biden has 50 years of experience giving speeches and talking a good game, a better game than he often delivers. And that is very much what the speech last night was. Now, for the first, I'd say, quarter of the speech of the State of the Union, it was about Russia and the Ukraine and the actions he's taken, and he omitted the actions he did not take or the mistakes he made, which is typical for anybody in politics, is to gloss over the mistakes that we make and not be willing to be honest about it. So when Joe Biden was discussing the Ukraine, he was discussing Russia. What he did not mention was that he failed to sanction Russia, and at a time when he could have possibly prevented many of this by sanctioning their oil and energy production, by ramping back up our energy production here domestically, by deciding to be energy independent so we didn't buy 70 million barrels of oil from them a day. We weren't spending ridiculous amounts of money to basically fund Russia's incursion into the Ukraine. And then his comments, basically in no short order, said that we were going to do nothing until he had already put boots on the ground in the Ukraine. Now, see, this is an issue. As soon as he postured and looked like he was going to do something, this is one of those issues. I don't have to wait for you to slap me in the face before I hit you. If I see you about to swing and hit me in the face, I will hit you first. Same with you when you see a criminal reaching for a gun. At the point where you pick up that gun, you mean me imminent deadly harm, bodily harm, and I will respond accordingly. That is how we should have dealt with Putin. I don't agree with putting, and it was right not to put troops on the ground. We should not be going and putting troops on the ground in Russia. So that's something I actually agree with. But most of the discussion last night was about things he wishes he could do, and he had a lot of partisan support. A lot of the stuff was stuff that you heard Donald Trump say he wanted to do or that he had planned to do, and some things that he took from the American agenda, buy American, bring back American manufacturing, so on and so forth, and those are good things. And I'll call balls some strikes. The issue is, how does he believe that he can do that? Because the methodology of actually achieving it is different. Just because both sides say that they're going to do something doesn't mean they'll go about achieving that in the exact same manner. Now, in regard to moving off of our dependence on energy from Russia, rather than ramping up oil production, which we could do immediately, we're waiting for green subsidies and to switch our entire economy over to going green. Now, this is something that makes no sense to me whatsoever, because we're not there yet. at this point, the energy industry should not be being subsidized on either side of the aisle. It should not be oil subsidies or green energy subsidies. Things are already happening naturally. The world has already decided culturally that they want to go green. People will pay the money to go green. So just let it happen. But we need to stop restricting oil production in favor of in a green energy sector that's not here yet. It's just not there. And when you hear stuff like we're going to have a green military, that our military is going green, almost everything the military uses is diesel. Our Humvees, our MRAPs, our everything works on fuel. Our jets are not going green. Our aircraft carriers are not going green unless you put a nuclear reactor in every single one of them. It's getting ridiculous. This is why I mean when I often on the campaign trail I say that both parties engage in political posturing, and I'm going to get to CPAC after discussing the State of the Union. Both parties engage in political posturing, and this political posturing comes in the form of saying something that you want to get done without saying how you can actually get it done. For instance, if I tell you I wanted to ban the Department of Education, I am a single congressman out of 535 legislators in DC. If I'm elected, I don't have the power to get rid of the Department of Education. Do I have a plan to which they become obsolete and then we can move off of them and get rid of them? Yeah, I do. And it goes the same with the Federal Reserve. We can move in that direction, but it's incremental steps in the same direction, not a rip the Band-Aid off and let the whole system fall apart overnight. Because that's not a solution. That's an intellectually pure argument that's not able to be applied in reality. In utopia on either side of the aisle is not physically possible. So when you saw some of the other issues, I mean, Joe Biden he checked his boxes for the left, affordable child care, prescription drugs, which I see prescription drugs as a nonpartisan issue. The issue, once again, is how do you achieve it? Do you achieve it through price transparency? Do you achieve it through accountability and capitalism and more competition by allowing people to be able to get generic versions of the same drugs easily? Do you get rid of the need for you to go to a doctor and spend tons of money just to get a prescription for something that is a pretty mundane, like, say, an inhaler? There are things that can be done, and they can be done in a very reasonable manner. And in that vein is where we're supposed to work together to move the ball forward. But altogether, Joe Biden was pretty upbeat last night. It looked like he was trying to make a unifying argument at a time when his poll numbers are literally in the basement. They couldn't go, it almost seems like it couldn't possibly go lower. He's even suffering with his own base. That's usually not a good sign for presidency. So he sort of pivoted and tried to go in a different direction of some of the policies of the previous administration. Obviously, there's animosity. There will be no credit given to the previous administration. That's a part of political play, and I despise it on both sides. When things go right, you give credit to the people who got them right. Even if I disagree with you on everything else, I can admit that you got one thing right. So then he talked about his child care. He talked about green energy. I already discussed that, and climate change. It's not as big of a deal as the left is making out to be, and it can be solved by, once again, more free market solutions, because the competition and the desire, the demand is already there. The supply is catching up very, very fast thanks to people like Elon Musk. When it comes to Ukraine, there's a lot of stuff. I'll do a separate video on what we can do and what Putin is likely to continue to do, and how we can pivot through there, and what action we should or should not take, because that's an entirely separate issue. But what I heard on stage last night was a lot of political platitudes, but not a lot of actual explanation of how to solve problems. Now, some things he did mention were jobs, bringing back American manufacturing. He mentioned building tech factories in Ohio, and I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, when my parents were still active duty, off Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. I know the area very well. When he was talking about 20 miles outside of, I believe he said Columbus, that is an area. Columbus, Dayton more so than Columbus. These are areas, especially Cincinnati, areas that have been run down when the auto industry has taken hits over the years. They've taken a lot of hits. Their industry has been going back up somewhat, but it could definitely use some help. So the jobs, oh, sorry, kicked my desk. The jobs would definitely be wanted, and bring back American manufacturing thing. I believe almost everyone agrees with. We do need to be completely independent from China at this point, which is something that Joe Biden did not mention in his speech. He did not mention China at all. Not the Uyghur genocide, not the genocide games. Pretty much stayed off of China entirely, which I view to be cowardice, complete and utter cowardice. How can you talk about one dictatorial regime who is engaging in imperial practices, but we ignore the fact that China is doing the exact same thing in South China Sea and looking at taking back Taiwan? It's just me, but everything that China has done over the past year, 2 years, 3 years, has shown them to be no better than the National Socialist German Workers' Party. Nazi. The Nazi Party, for those who are not educated in the matter. So we went to war against them. I'm not advocating for war against China, but we should be doing something economically to thwart them, which brings me back to being energy independent here at home, where we have our own oil and natural gas reserves, where we don't have to depend on them, bringing back our manufacturing and supply chains here to the US so we don't have to depend on halfway around the world to be able to get the goods and services that we need. There are a lot of things that we could do. We cannot disengage, and this is where I disagree with my libertarian brothers and sisters that I agree with on a lot of things. Isolationism doesn't work, because what it does create is Russia and China, Iran, North Korea, all the dictators around the world that honestly do hate the US and want us gone. We do have actual enemies, not always the enemies of our own making. We have legitimate enemies who are intellectual enemies. They can't exist in the same world as us because we are antithetical to them, or at least we are founded to be antithetical to them. So they need to subvert everything that makes our culture what it is and everything that makes America what it is and as powerful as it is. So what we need to do is we need to be independent from all that, but we cannot isolate, because if we pulled everything back, one gentleman said we should close all of our bases, close all of our embassies, pull back from the world, leave all of these conflicts and peacekeeping missions, and stay within the U.S. I understand the sentiment, and I honestly I agree with the sentiment, but that's not logistically possible, because at the point where we actually finally have to deal with these people, we're not dealing with them as the small guys who are punching above their weight class like they are now. We're dealing with them at the point where they've already gained so much ground, so much power, and they actually do have the ability to go toe to toe with us here domestically on our own ground if they're working together, which China and Iran and Russia have signed a treaty to do so. Now, that Biden did talk about the unions, he did talk about the tech sector, talked about taxes. He took a shot at the previous administration for a tax cut that he said only benefited the top, a $2 trillion tax cut that only benefited top 1%ers. It's not true. I'm not a one percenter. I felt the tax cut. It helped me. It helped our business. It helped our employees. So that's a bold-faced lie. In the last administration, people believed that the country was on the right track and that it was getting better, and everyone felt that there was an increase in their paychecks. Why? Inflation was down, wages were up, employment was up. We had an employment, we literally had a job surplus to the point where we didn't have enough people that were able and eligible to work to fill the job. Now, I want to be completely clear with that. That is different from having low unemployment numbers, but having a low job market participation rate. When you have a bunch of people who have left the job market and no longer looking for jobs, that drops the unemployment. That drops the people who are in unemployment who are looking for jobs but can't get jobs or do not have a job yet. Okay. When these people move back into the market, unemployment's going to spike. Okay, when these people no longer can live because inflation has gone up and the money that they have saved away has less buying power, they have to re-enter the market and unemployment's going to shoot up. This is why, and I disdain on both sides of the aisle, the using of statistics and omitting of statistics to be able to prove an argument when in reality you're leaving out half the argument in the nuances that allow people to take you honestly. Again, this is more politician stuff. It's right up there with telling people that you're going to create a coalition to solve a problem, but you're not actually creating a coalition to solve the problem. You're creating a coalition to look like you're solving the problem, to appear to actually care. Okay. So when I was watching the State of the Union last night, obviously I've said a lot about it. Now let's get to the GOP rebuttal. Just for a minute. Biden, once again, did a lot of platitudes, but didn't actually talk about solving anything. He didn't explain how anything was going to be solved. He did throw in a lot of the stuff that was in the Build Back Better plan, but did not mention Build Back Better. Not once. He tiptoed around it, talked about a lot of the policies, talked about some of the stuff he'd like to get done. And you can tell that when it comes to trying to create those jobs in the tech sector and so on and so forth, we don't want to engage in cronyism. And we create we become corporatists, and then the corporations basically wield the power of government against us and against smaller businesses rather than just competing in the marketplace and small businesses being able to do the same and work in the marketplace as well, which helps the consumer, helps the average person. And more competition also creates more jobs, innovation, so on and so forth. The methodology of trying to achieve a lot of this is what is important. Don't focus on just the words. I don't care who the politician is. Look deeper at what they're actually doing, because what we say versus what we do is entirely different. And let's talk about the GOP rebuttal. The governor from Iowa, she did a very good job. She laid out all the mistakes of Biden, because we should not let them forget what they've done and what this administration has done by any means. By any standard, should we allow them to be able to just pivot into apparently the coronavirus is gone and the pandemic is over, and we're going to drop the mask mandates, we're going to drop the vaccine mandates, we're going to drop the lockdowns and stuff, and they're just going to pretend as if they've been on the right side of this the entire time. No, the data was there. The data was there years ago now at this point. The data was there over a year and a half ago that the masks were not effective. The vaccines did not stop the spread of the virus. Biden did say that in the middle of the speech, that vaccines stop the spread. They don't. They don't. They limit hospitalizations to keep the hospitals from being overwhelmed. That was true. Okay. I'm not going to argue with you about the effectiveness of the vaccine and side effects and all that, because I have an issue with them not publishing the data as well. But we need to be honest and say, though, those three issues, stopping slowing down hospitalizations, slowing down severe cases and deaths, those are where the vaccines were effective. The stopping the spread, they did not do. Stopping kids and family members from getting them did not happen. People with the vaccine still got COVID. Okay. They may not have ended up in the hospital, but they still got COVID. A lot of them ended up being asymptomatic and still spreading it. You can still spread it when you're asymptomatic. Okay. Once again, then you have deaths from versus by. Okay. Or from versus with. From COVID, dying from COVID, as in I shot you and you died, versus I shot you and then a year later you died of cancer. Okay. There's a difference. Now, the GOP rebuttal was very good. She lined out all the mistakes that the current administration has made. Absolutely loved it. Could have been more hopeful and more inspiring. I'm not a fan of fear and just battering people with what Democrats have done. We need to inspire people based on what we plan to do to fix it. What we plan to do in 2022, 2023, 2024 to make the country better. How is the GOP going to be better than the left? That's what we need to focus on. Now, I'm going to get to CPAC because I just got back from CPAC this weekend and I was not impressed. I said so in an interview with Korean CPAC, and I also said so in a speech at one of the after party events. Everyone went to CPAC and spent 4 days patting ourselves on the back as if the war was already over, as if we had already won, as if just winning back the House and winning back the Senate is enough. It's not enough. There were a lot of people that went on that stage and talked about how bad Democrats are, how bad Joe Biden is, and I told you so, and Donald Trump was right. Those four things are right, yeah. Joe Biden sucked, the current administration sucks, their policy sucks, Trump was right, and a lot of this stuff would not have happened under Trump. That's all true. But we didn't need 4 days of that. And we didn't need highly intellectual panels to tell us that. What we did need was 4 days of call to action, how to save the country, how to fix the problem, what policies would solve this issue, and dig in deep. Most of the policies that left-leaning voters complain about are problems that conservative principles of governance do have an answer for. And we have a better answer for them than even the establishment within our party would allow you to believe, because the antagonistic relationship between the parties, it helps them. It helps the fundraising, gets ratings, clicks, likes, retweets, shares. Rather than being purposely antagonistic, I'd rather be solutionary. Focus on how we solve the problem. We could have had 4 days of call to action and sent everybody from CPAC home invigorated and ready to fight. Instead, we had 4 days of taking pictures with your favorite congressman or pundit, posting them online, growing your Twitter and Instagram followings, and pretending to be an activist. Meanwhile, the majority of those people will go home, kick up their feet, drink a beer, not pound the pavement, not knock a door, not wave a sign, not donate to a candidate, not run for office, not run for school board or town council. You get my point, okay? Action versus words. There is a disconnect between the type of people we support versus what we have been asking for. We asked for people who are like Trump, who did not come from politics, who did not kiss asses and rub elbows to get to where they are, who did not climb the political ladder. Let me explain what a career politician is. If you entered into a study and a career to obtain office and get into politics, you are a career politician. You just haven't been elected yet, which means you'll do what it takes to get elected, and then you'll do what it takes to stay there. And if you're willing to lie to get there, you're willing to lie to stay there. That's the truth of it. There's a lot of that happening all over the country. Even some of your favorite MAGA America First candidates voted for red flag laws. You don't believe me? Go ahead and look it up. There were 135 of them. You'll find your favorite candidate on that list. See, I'm going to call it straight across the aisle. That's the whole purpose of my campaign, is to be the honest one who's telling you the truth, who's not going to lie to you, who's going to keep it real. If we're going to move the ball forward, we need to be focusing on continuously growing the party. Capitulating to the base is not enough. There is not enough Republicans in this country to save it. There are not enough conservatives in this country to save it. We need to grow conservatism. And when I say conservatism, I mean conservative principles of governance for politicians. Every elected official needs to be focused on conservative principles of governance, conserving the Constitution, the Republic, and the inalienable rights of individuals to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, for the culture, growing and moving forward social conservatism, how we interact with each other within society, what we expect, what we raise our kids to believe in, the founding principles, and how we interact with the rest of the world. Okay? Peace through strength, all that. Those are platform planks that fall under the principles of governance. They work in tandem. They don't cross. You can't legislate culture. And if we try to legislate, go to DC and legislate, but we're not focused on winning over the culture, we're screwed. We're going to lose. Now, I know a lot of the MAGA rappers and stuff like Patriot J, Ronnie J. Spikes, a bunch of Toffer and them. We were all at a CPAC hanging out, and some of them were not allowed on stage because they have face tats. They were not allowed on stage. Now, these are MAGA rappers talking about freedom and liberty and Christ, who are not allowed on stage because they have face tats. Because apparently guys who lived a jaded life prior to coming to Christ, or a jaded life prior to coming to conservatism, aren't welcome here. They weren't allowed on stage. So, a little bit of perspective. We got our own cancel culture on our side too. And we need to cut that out. If you really want to grow the party, you need to, these people, those rappers, these young millennials and Gen Zers that are doing podcasts and stuff, the conservative TikTokers and all this, they're feeding into the culture. All these podcasters, all these different avenues are feeding into the culture. You can't have a legislative battle and lose the culture and think you're going to win back the country and preserve freedom and liberty. Ronald Reagan said it. We're the last bastion of freedom on earth. If it dies here, it dies everywhere. And you can see that now. We got a weak president in office, and now every single treaty that we have around the world is in question. We have nations that want us to back off and stay away because they believe that we're more of a problem right now than we are a solution. So, good morning. Welcome back to the Blue Collar Intellectual. I will be seeing you very, very soon.